Welcome to another episode of Artist Spotlight, the podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Stringer. And as always, brought to you by the Maryland Photography Alliance, where you can check out what they have going on. There's always contests and events and just a lot of really good information that is valuable. It can help you meet like-minded people. You can find out about what's going on in that community. And you can take a look at mdphotoalliance.org. That's where all the information is. And I know I am prone to say, if you check it out 1 week, come back a week or 10 days later, and there's bound to be updated information that will be useful. So definitely encourage you to take a look. Well, in this episode, I am joined by Tom DiPace, and Tom has had a 40-plus year career in sports photography. He's done just phenomenal work over that period of time, and I think that one of the many impressive things that Tom has been able to do, from my perspective, is to not only be a standout editorial sports photographer, but also work in the commercial photography space in sports photography. And that's not something that is that often done. And we'll touch on that and a whole lot more. So with that, I want to welcome Tom to the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me, Mitch. This is exciting.
So you and I both are longtime baseball fans. And, you know, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned that early on, you were not a huge fan, but in 1969, growing up in the New York, New Jersey area, you sort of found baseball after the Mets beat my Orioles in 1969. What was that like at that time, you know, in your neighborhood when the Mets won the World Series?
It was crazy. I mean, from adults to children, I mean, everybody was celebrating, and it was just this, for me, it was a newfound thing. You know, like I said, I wasn't in love with baseball, but my dad played. Little side note, my dad got drafted by the Giants as a pitcher. And then back then there was no money. So they wanted to start a family, and he actually he had made more money as an auto mechanic. But he was in single A ball with the Giants, and my uncle was a bullpen catcher for the Brooklyn Dodgers. So baseball it's constant in my family, but I didn't relate to it till I was 9, and they won the World Series. And then after that, I started playing little league ball at 10, and it was just like a birth basically for me of loving a sport.
How in growing up, how long did you play baseball? Did you play through junior high or high school, or how many?
I played all the way through high school. When I moved to Florida, I was 12. And so I hadn't played in Delray Beach was where I went to high school. All the same guys played, from little league all the way to senior league and so on. So the coaches all knew those guys. And I didn't play little league until I played at 13 when I got here. And so there was a little bit of favoritism and name recognition. And I honestly didn't blossom as a player till I was 14, going on 15. So I tried out for the junior varsity team in the high school. My birthday's in December, so I was young. It was 3 pitches. That was my tryout. 3 pitches, smoke, didn't hit one thing, gone. And I was just determined that year. I knew I was good and I knew I was better. And somewhere along the way, I had read a thing about Ted Williams, how he got his swing, and he would swing the bat. And I'm not kidding. I'm pretty sure I'm right. 1,000 times a day, where he would just with a mirror and work on a swing. And so for that entire off season, my off season, not intentional off season, but because I didn't make the JV and I did play little league or senior league, I just practiced. And we had a wall in my house outside, just a brick wall, and I had 5 baseballs, and I would just I had nobody to play with. I would just throw baseballs at this brick wall, annihilating the baseballs, but it gave me a chance to work in my arm and what have you. So the next year I couldn't wait, and I tried out for varsity, and all the guys were like, yeah, right. New York. And I still had quite the accent, the New York stuff going on. And Steve Garvey's hitting style back then, it was quiet. And I practiced that. And you know what? I was hitting line drive seeds. And so go to the practice, and I was just crushing the ball. And so I ended up making the varsity team, and all the other
Wow.
guys that blew me off that made it to JV went back to JV. And that year, my sophomore year, we went to the state semifinals, and it was the most exciting year of my life playing baseball in high school. It was just, I mean, that doesn't happen very often. And several of the guys on my team were drafted. Jeff Morrison was drafted by the Cincinnati Reds as a pitcher. Jerome Burgess was drafted by I think the Red Sox. Nobody made it, but it was just, we had some talent. It was fun. And I just loved baseball. I mean, it was like I lived and breathed baseball back then, and always as I became an adult, but what also happened in those early years that got me. So when I moved to Florida and I found out that spring training existed, this was the big thing. I begged my mom to take me to West Palm Beach Stadium, and the next closest one was in Pompano Beach, where the Texas Rangers were. So she would drive me up to West Palm Beach, and she'd leave me, and I'm 13 years old. And I wore out a pattern between the locker rooms, back and forth, the visiting and the home. And I got autographs like there was no tomorrow. And I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just like, I had like notepads and 3x5 cards. And there were some kids that were like me. And I just was obsessed with this. So then I got a 126 Instamatic camera. And I figured out that if I got I was able to get that first spot in the dugout in the stands, that I could call players over and they would come over and pose for me with my 126 Instamatic. And I mean, I'm talking Brooks, I'm talking Earl Weaver, Walter Alston, Kenny Singleton, so the Orioles were in Miami, the Dodgers were in Vero, and the Expos and the Braves were in West Palm Beach. And that was just, I still have pictures of all this stuff. I kept a lot of this stuff. Steve Garvey posed for me. That was like such a big deal. You have somebody that you're emulating as a young player, and then to meet them, and just see it was like the beginning of me understanding the personalities of players, and we're all human, and like I wasn't enamored. I was never enamored, and I think that was vital for my career in my business, because if you cannot be starstruck, it's like it hurts it hurts what you're doing, I think. And so I did that. And then when my wife and Chris and I got married, I'll just jump ahead because I think this is a cool segue to this. I was working, we had my son Nick. So I'm 20 years old with baby. You got to get at it. Got to work, got to do something. Loved photography, but never looked at it as a vocation. So I was working with my brother-in-law building homes. And in South Florida, that could beat you down pretty quick after, from footers to roofs, So about 6 months go by, and I saw that an ad that this 1 hour photo lab was going to open up in West Palm Beach. It was called Photo 60. And it was in the mall. So it was like, and the mall was a new thing, and everything was new, right? And so I begged my wife, I said, just give me 6 months. Let me try. If I don't, I can always go back to working for Joe, my brother-in-law. So I go there, I apply. I said I had experience. Who had experience in that? It was like a new,
of course.
but I said I did. And I got the job. Well, it was like, perfect match. I fell in love with it. Within 6 months, I was manager of this facility. Now I could do my hours. I could do whatever, right? I'm 21 now. I'm 21. Well, guess who's across the street? The West Palm Beach Stadium, the Braves and the Expos. So now one of my customers comes in. His name was Jerry Buckley. You might know the name. He was a Red Sox team photographer.
Okay.
And back in the 60s and 70s, he came in and he would bring us some, like he was retired now. And we started talking, and I told him what my dream would be, my dream job, whatever. And he really encouraged me and told me what to do and, ideas. And so I went across the street and I started soliciting photography services to at first the Expos. And Kevin McHale was the general manager for the Expos back then. And he said, sure, we could use help. So next thing I know, I'm on the field and I'm taking pictures of Andre Dawson and Tim Raines and Gary Carter. And I build relationships with these guys. And Tim Raines literally would come over and visit me in the mall on his way home in shower shoes and uniform. And he'd
That's
come
great.
in and so my store was just outside the mall. So he didn't have to actually go in the mall, but it was attached. And so he would come in and he'd go in my office and we would just sit there and shoot the crap. It was the craziest. I'm like, I'm sitting here with Tim Raines, little did I know. I mean, there's a lot of times he showed up and I'm like, he looked glazed, like a little glazed. And I didn't know
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And so, yeah, I started doing work for them and then word got out and then the Braves were owned by Ted Turner. And so John Holland, who was the club, what do you call it? The clubby, I guess. Yeah. He was in charge of doing extra hires for things. And what Ted Turner started to do was parties after spring training games. They'd put up a big tent and they'd have his buddies, his TBS people, or at the time, Channel 17, and they needed a photographer. So I'd go over there. I would take, grip and grin type shots, run across the street, process the film, bring it back. This became like I was the available photographer all of a sudden. And then
Mhm.
Wayne Minshew, who was the public relations director for the Atlanta Braves, asked me, he's like, hey, can you shoot our spring training cover? And then can you shoot our cover for the regular season? And I'm like, I mean, I was terrible. I didn't even know what I was doing, but I said yes.
Of
And I think
course.
that was always the key. And I did a cover shoot with, it was Dale Murphy, Bob Horner, Jerry Royster, and I think the shortstop, Rafael Ramirez, anyway.
Wow. Good memory there.
Yeah. And so I started doing all these things and that just kept evolving every spring. And then Gary Carter and I really hit it off. And Gary had this Sweet and Low Foundation where his mom had died of cancer. And he always did a huge golf tournament and he always needed a fresh shot for 8x10s because he signed them and he put them in everybody's gift bags or whatever. So he approached me and now it's 1984. Yeah, 1983, 1984. And so I did that. And then that winter, he got traded to the Mets, right? And so, we had each other's phone numbers and stuff. And so he calls me around Christmas time, I remember. I think the trade happened in mid-December. And then he calls me and he's like, hey, Tommy, how would you like to have the exclusive photo shoot of me in a Mets uniform? I need it for my foundation. And I'm like, okay, sure, And he goes, all right, meet me, let's see, January 5th in the morning at the stadium. Let's do it early. He goes, I know you'll like it because the light will be nice. And I'm like,
Oh,
okay.
wow. He's thinking
Yeah.
along those lines. That's
Yeah,
great.
he was thinking along those lines. So sure enough, I meet him at West Palm Beach Stadium at 8:30 in the morning, or I was there probably 8:15ish. And he's in full Mets pinstripes. He's got all his gear, everything. I'm like, of course, I was still a little bit of a fan, right? Still had that in me. And I was just so giddy that this was happening. But yet, Gary was such a down to earth, amazing human that, he never made me feel, he was like treated me just like a buddy. And so we did this amazing photo shoot and the light was golden. And I have now this exclusive with Gary Carter, who was at the time, I'm going to say that was the biggest news in baseball that off season. And he's like, all right, well, meet me after you get everything processed and so I want to look at it. Meet me at JJ Muggs next week, which is like a Applebee's type of a place. And there I am sitting with Gary Carter at a booth and we're looking over photos and he's looking at slides and prints and deciding what he wants. And then he goes, and you can do whatever you want with these. I don't care. They're all for you. So sure enough, I reach out. Every publication existed and they all basically told me to pound sand. I
Wow.
don't want to name names, but the one that said yes was the new publication called Inside Sports that was published by Newsweek. And I believe Randy Strand was the editor. And so I end up with the cover, full page inside, and a couple other small photos. And I was like, wow, all right, take good photos and sell them. This is a good concept. I like this. And I think that's really what started me on my journey in 1985 was just the possibility of that future. Definitely didn't happen overnight. Definitely wasn't a snap of the finger, but process, the passion and the drive just kept me going, and I just constantly was looking to see what opportunities were out there for me as a sports photographer. And I will say in those early days in the 80s, a kid, obviously I was 20 years old, 21 years old. I saw Rich Pilling, and I saw Rich Pilling working his magic at, for Sport Magazine, but really as a freelancer, and he just, would just give me a little bit of advice here and there, and and I listened and gleaned on that. And then I'm going to say a couple years after that, he got the job at the Sporting News, and he didn't hesitate to hire me for some things. And that got me going into Sporting News. And then my first Super Bowl was the Joe Montana Cincinnati Bengals.
Cowboys. Oh, the Bengals. Okay, yeah.
Bengals, yeah, with Ickey Woods, and down here when it was in Miami. And that was my first Super Bowl. And I've done 29 since, kind of holding in a holding pattern right now. I'd like to have an even 30 before I walk away, but we'll see what happens. It's still a nice number. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got started. It was just people along the way, mostly, players, and then, a little bit of a push. And then I just, I don't know. I just kept going at it. Spring training was vital, obviously, because it was here, and everything was more relaxed. It's just a different atmosphere than regular season. And so I was able to do a lot of shooting and a lot of relationships. And I started working for Topps also in 1984. There was a guy named Phil Carter, but I actually did, who was working for Topps. And then there's a gentleman named Cy Berger, who was the creator.
Legendary.
It's pretty funny. I say that, and I go up to the Topps offices, and not so many people know who he is anymore. It's kind of sad. I'm like, dude, well, it's like asking a ball player sometimes, you're like, Ted Williams, and they're like, yeah, I don't know Ted Williams. I don't know that name. It's humbling. So anyway, but I did work with his daughter, Maxine, and we did all these books together with a writer named Red Foley, who was a famous broadcaster writer. I'm not really sure, but we did all these baseball books and back in the 80s, and just endeared me to Cy because we worked together. And so I was always involved with Topps, and and just got a call yesterday, and this spring will mark 40 years for Topps. That's just crazy. I just can't believe it.
That's amazing. And did you grow up collecting baseball cards as well? Or
I did, man. I don't know. I mean, I'm going to say that, that I discovered at 7-Eleven carried baseball cards, and I could ride my bike. My parents would let me ride my bike miles back then. You weren't worried about anything. And I would go to this Gristedes shopping center by my house on Higby Lane and buy packs of cards and just sit. I couldn't wait. I mean, the thing that Topps has marketed so well is the ripping, and being able to look for the Wonka ticket is what I consider now with the way they do the cards. But yeah, and I and all I wanted was Mets, so as a kid, I would just go through my cards and I'd separate my Mets and I'd have them on top of the stack all the time. Of course, I rubber banded them, and I have two funny stories about my baseball cards as a kid. One was I was in school and I brought my cards to school, and, recess, we were going to do leans and flips and, what you did with baseball cards. And I just remember getting my Mets. Don Clendenin was on the top of my cards, right? And I had them rubber banded, and they were on my desk, and the teacher kept saying, put them away. And so I didn't do it fast enough, and she took them, and I was crushed. And I'm like 10, and I was crushed. She took my cards. So we go to recess, and everybody's lined up, and I'm in the back of the line, and I lingered. And I went and took them out of her desk drawer because I didn't want her to have my cards. And I got in so much trouble for that. And then another time, after I moved to Florida, I met a kid during the spring training running around getting autographs, and his name was Kyle, and he was a big Braves fan. And so we sat down, our moms got us together, and he came over my house, and we were going over our cards. And he was looking for his Braves, and I was looking for Mets. And so he wanted my Cecil Upshaw card.
Oh, wow.
And I said, well, I want that. Who's with Nolan Ryan on his card?
Is it Koosman?
Koosman, yes.
Or either him or Gary Gentry. I can't remember who.
His rookie card. The rookie card. I think it's Koosman. Anyway, I was able to procreate that deal then and there. I've got the Nolan Ryan rookie for Cecil Upshaw. And so
that's a pretty good deal.
Yes, it's a really good deal.
So the answer is Jerry Koosman.
Okay, I was right. Okay, Jerry Kuzman.
Yep.
And so that was at let's say, 11 years old, 12 years old, 12 years old. And so I kept in touch with Kyle probably till we're 15, 16 years old. Every year he'd be like, "Hey, you kind of stole that from me." I'm like, "Oh
Oh,
no.
wow.
No, 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 no. This was the deal." I didn't even, I mean, I think about it. In 1971, 72, Nolan Ryan he got traded. He was no good. He was
Yeah.
wild. He went to the Angels for Jim Fregosi. It was like,
Hmm.
that was not, I didn't steal it, but who knew, right?
Right, right, right.
That's the beauty of it. So I got that in my collection. And I've collected ever since. There might have been a few down years once, we were busy with our kids and I didn't. But now I'm a bad, I'm buying cards like crazy. It's not fun because of the way they do it now. I mean, like I said, you're just like looking for those specials, and then you don't have like the normal I will say, as much as I love my years working for Upper Deck, which was phenomenal and special, and I very, very, very dear to my heart, but what I realized as a collector back then was they're ruining the industry, because we couldn't,
Yes.
you didn't know what was the card or not. There was like 6 rookie cards, and then Fleer had their rookie cards, and then Donruss had their rookie, and all of a sudden everybody was overprinting it was overwhelming. And that really was why it kind of died down. I think because people just didn't know which way was up with the card industry. But it's definitely, and it's funny, it's like COVID kind of brought it back. I don't know. All of a
Oh,
sudden, right then
for
is when it
sure.
started to renaissance again. What do you
Well,
think?
for me, and this will kind of date me a little bit, but I think for me, I started card collecting in 75, a little bit. And then when I really just kind of like lost my mind and went all in was 76. And
Okay.
the thing with the 76 cards is that this sounds like it's a baseball card podcast. Is that in 75, the card had that facsimile autograph on it of the player.
Yes.
77 had the same thing, facsimile autograph. The 76 set had no such autograph. So it was a very clean image. And for me, not only did I just really connect with that card, but it started my fascination with photography
Mm-hmm.
because you're looking at roughly 600, give or take, photos. And I mean, I studied these cards to the extent that if friends would say to me, 1976, Mike Cosgrove, pitcher for the Astros, I could strike the pose that Mike Cosgrove, who was probably the 12th pitcher on the roster, what the card looked like. And kids would literally pull out cards, not show me the card, just say the name, and I could get in the batting stance, or I could simulate the action shot of Ray Fosse, with the A's. And I mean, it was literally like an addiction. So for me, that was really when my eyes were open to photography. Now I know, you, as you said, you would take your camera and you would say, hey, Mr. Robinson, and Brooks Robinson would turn around, or Ken Singleton, or whoever. What was it? Family members that you saw with cameras? How did you come to get a camera, to actually have that opportunity to take it to the ballpark with you?
So funny, my dad, was a very successful auto mechanic, and he had his own store, shops and everything. But I will say this, that he gave me his rangefinder. I think it was a Kodak camera, but it had like, you could move the lens up and down, and it should slide. And I started playing with that when I was like, 14, 15, from the Instamatic to that. And then I don't know. I mean, I'm going to say my dad was the one who really introduced me, and he wasn't a photographer. But after he passed away, I started going through boxes, and I found all these Kodachromes of my family, like precious stuff that's like, and Kodachromes they don't lie. I mean, they're beautiful images when they're shot correctly, and all of his stuff was on point. And some of the stuff, I mean, I've scanned it. It looks like it was yesterday, today, like, I mean, it's phenomenal. So I'm going to say that was the beginning. And then I did take yearbook class in high school. And I chose to do the photography aspect of it then, and I was able to save up money, and I bought a Yashica Teleelectro X camera, 35 millimeter, fell in love with that. And then I started buying, the off-brand lenses to, because I couldn't afford the great lenses. But that's how I started shooting in spring training and everything. I mean, a lot of my stuff is not with the best of quality. It's okay, but then I begged my grandfather for $1,000, which was really hard. And he had money, but it was really hard to do to get it from him. And I bought a 300-2.8 Nikkor and an FM Nikkor FM camera, and that was the game changer there. All of a sudden, you get a 1.4 converter, and you got a 400, wide open, and I'm shooting in the bright sun and spring training, and just figured it out, and then I was making really nice images for pretty much a novice professional. I wouldn't say I was there yet. It took a lot, but again, the relationships really made a difference with me with the players, because I would get guys that asked me to do photos for them, and that gave me opportunity. And then I would do photos. I would ask them, Tim Raines. I probably did more photo shoots with Tim Raines. It was terrible. One time we did a bat on fire, and I put rubber cement all over the bat. And I said, listen, if it's really, come and drop it, just drop the bat. And he's over there waving it, and I'm like freaking out. And the PR guy's like, he's like, you're going to burn Tim Raines. And I'm like, it's just terrible. But we did stuff where we put rubber cement on the dirt and lit it, so that I had him like take off, and it looked like flames coming off his shoes. I mean, all this stuff was like, I don't even remember what I was lighting it with. I think, oh my gosh, what were those? They sounded like screaming eels when they warmed up, like from Princess Bride.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I know what you mean, but I can't think of the name of it. But yeah,
200B brand. But anyway, it was just a big pop. And, I just would do stuff like that all the time. And it grew and grew and grew. And then people started hiring me, and I was doing, definitely in spring training, I did a lot of, started to do editorial work, and I started to do a trading cards, a lot of trading card stuff, which was amazing. And then I kept working in the photo lab. And what I did in the photo labs, which was so vital to my growth as a photographer, was, the 1 hour photo lab was great, but I wanted more. I wanted to advance in basically processing and what it was like to, make beautiful color prints and sepia tones and just all the, not sepia tone. Yeah. Is that, what do they call it when you make from a slide? Yeah.
Not necessarily. Well, sepia would be that sort of that brownish tone to it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. What is it called? The age is getting to me. Well, whatever. Yeah. I went and worked at a commercial lab in West Palm Beach. And again, my boss there was a hard liner. Like, I thought, no way am I going to get my 2 hour lunch breaks at spring training. No way is this. And you know what? I was able to work so hard for him because I had a desire and I had a passion and I didn't want to give it up. And so I was able to get him to give me the 2 hour lunch breaks as long as I had all the work done that I needed to have work done. And so I would stay late. I would come in early, and because, we just had clients and they would need their work done. And I would just bust my ass for this guy. And he, in return, opened the clock for me. And I was able to go to during spring training and shoot all the baseball I wanted to. Then back in that time, processing is expensive. Mm-hmm. And, like I said, at this point I have 2 children. And every penny counted. And so I couldn't be like dropping $20 a roll of E6 times 20. That would have been more than a week's worth of food back then. And so this guy gave me my rolls processed for $1 a roll. Wow. So I would pay $20 for my football. I'd come back from a Dolphin game and I'd have my 20 rolls of Fujichrome pushed, whatever, and cost me $20. So there it was. There was the beginning of the profitability and the opportunity to continue that. And then, honestly, in 1989 is when I know you touched on this with Brad, because I listened to that one and your podcast with him. And late 1989, VJ Lavero reached out to me, and I started working for the Upper Deck, the Lavero Group. And wow, that was a cash cow, and that was
a whirlwind. It was a whirlwind, wasn't it?
It was such a whirlwind. But it was amazing. It was amazing. And And I dominated a lot of the sets because of imagery that I already did. And then obviously the newer stuff that I was about to do for them. And I had at that time also started shooting a lot of minor league stuff because it was in my backyard. And so they did minor league card sets, and it was just amazing. And that really, so yeah, that was the time that, so my third daughter was born in 1990 in March, and I made the decision in January to go freelance full time. And between Upper Deck and then Sporting News and Inside Sports and Sport Magazine, which was another great thing for me. And then in 1990 is when Russell Beaker called me from USA Today, and they started the Baseball Weekly. And I ended up becoming the staff photographer for Baseball Weekly for 20 plus years after that. And that was the most amazing run I had, because I got the opportunity. Once the success of that publication started, I'm going to say probably year 2 or 3, and Barbara Jean Germano ended up going there as well as a photo editor after Russell. They saw that if they did regional covers, that they were going to sell more publications. And so they would call me and be like, hey, we need Derek Jeter. We need Darryl Strawberry as a Dodger. And this was all like within the week. And I would have to, they'd look at the schedule and they'd be like, okay, the so-and-so's playing the Marlins or during spring training. And I would go and I would shoot sometimes multiple covers during the week, portraits. And I probably did more portraits during the national anthems in bullpens than so many. I remember Randy Johnson when he went to Arizona. And then I did a shoot with him and Kurt Schilling in the Marlins bullpen, where I put up a fake blue sky, which we had blue sky, but I just had a backdrop to make it cleaner. I would just do all kinds of covers. I put a bunch up on my website. I wasn't going to do it. And I was just like cleaning out my storage unit, and I had all the match prints, and I just started shooting pictures of them. And I'm like, this is kind of fun, actually. And so I put up looks like postage stamps on my website, but still, it's cool. It's a job well done. It's out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned, early on, you've sort of had not a dual career, but to my experience, knowing photographers, being able to bridge that editorial and then the commercial space. Editorially, you've worked with Sports Illustrated, USA Today, ESPN, People Magazine. Then commercially, Rawlings Sporting Goods, of course, it's the baseball or the baseball glove people and bats, etc. Adidas, Nike, Topps baseball cards, as we've been talking about. And I think that for most that I know, they have really been largely on the editorial side. What do you think it is about either your style or your business knowledge or your relationship building that has allowed you to really do both and have success on both sides of that, where for whatever reasons others generally either haven't pursued it or just haven't realized sort of dual success like that?
Yeah, so my first year with Rawlings was 1995, and I just when you first of all, when you taste commercial money and you see the difference, there's a desire there. And honestly, Mitch, the thing that I would say back then, and I always say it even today, is why not me? I know what I'm doing. Same concept, make good imagery, for whomever, don't ever put yourself in a box and say, I can only shoot football, or I can only shoot editorially. And even with that, I've heard this along the way where, the editorial world would put me in a box sometimes, and they'd be like, oh, he's a card guy. And they'd be afraid to give me that down and dirty assignment that might be, more of a street photographer type thing in sports, but just that. And I would have to constantly prove myself and wear different hats all the time. But when it came to the commercial side, I realized that, number one, like I said, there was a larger check at the end of that. And you build relationships with these companies, and it's just a matter of honestly letting your work speak for itself. And then, you do the job, and then you hope that there's another call, that they see that you've done a good job with that. So I went through, I did work with Wheaties. I did work with EA Sports. I had a run with EA Sports where My goodness, I shot so many of those box covers. I shot fight nights. I shot NBA lives. I shot Albert Pujols for when he was on when they did baseball. I did a couple of the Maddens. I shot Tiger Woods for one of and it was relationships, and that had nothing to do with location because they would fly me whenever we were ready to do it, and I'd go. One of the weirdest ones was I shot Dwayne Wade for NBA Live in Vancouver. And here he's in Florida, I'm in Florida, but they wanted us both at their studios in Vancouver. So whatever it took, I did Oscar De La Hoya in Las Vegas for one of the fight nights, which was amazing. And then you build relationships again. I can't harp on that enough because that's what business is all about. I mean, it's you have to have that personality to be able to like negotiate. You have to be able to communicate well with people, and you have to be able to have that. Again, your work always has to be there. You can't it's not BS, but you have to be able to do that. And I never shied away from that. I don't know where that came from. It's just in me, and I just always felt like that was the key. It's died down a lot now. I mean, my last, what I would say really big shoot was the one I did for Adidas, which was super cool. So I did Aaron Judge for Adidas, and they wanted to recreate the Kostakos brothers style posters.
Oh, those were great with like the
Yeah,
Bash Brothers and just all
right.
those back in the day.
So I worked with them, and I worked with John Kostakos, and he was like, "Well, Tom DiPace is our guy," and so he like oversaw the shoot, and it was done through an ad agency, and I've never had so much cooperation and so much. I mean, these guys were amazing, and so we ended up doing it in a studio in St. Petersburg, Florida, and for like weeks, we're collaborating on the set and how we're going to make it look and all this kind of stuff because the whole thing was Judgment Time, and
Okay.
Dom was telling me about how he recreated bats into gavels, and he was a mastermind with the fantasy type of things. We tore up a bunch of balls. We had these boxes that said evidence, and they were all smashed, and just it was really, really fun. And Aaron is just an amazing human being, just a super, super nice guy. And so yeah, we get the, and then I remember telling one of the directors of the stage and or the set, and I was like, yeah, I think we should do we'll put stadium lights in the background. He said, no, we'll build them. I go, what? You don't need to build stadium lights. I mean, this is like a simple drop in. We've done it. They were doing it back before Photoshop, back in the early 90s, they were doing cut and paste, back then. Well, sure enough, man, they built stadium lights. It was pretty wild, and I had a crew of like, I'm going to say 20 plus people, makeup and just grips, and just, it was amazing. And the result was amazing. And it was Adidas ended up creating with the Yankees a giveaway at Yankee Stadium. And yeah, that poster's out there. It's I have on my website a tiny version of it, but that was super fun. That was super fun. Yeah, and I mean, I've kind of scaled back. I still work for Rawlings, but I'm not doing as much commercial work as I would have liked to have done. I thought I would ease up on the action and be more studio as I got older. And here I am running my ass off still in football games.
Well, one of the things that really rings very true and very obvious to me is your work ethic, and that started at a very young age, and really got you in a position to make the most of your opportunities and to create opportunities. And as you said, I mean, you're out there doing it today. Every time I've seen you, whether it's at a football stadium or Camden Yards here in Baltimore, you're certainly a man on a mission. You've done this so many times. You know what you're trying to accomplish, and you're doing it. And I wonder, as you look at your career and you kind of have an awareness of people out there doing it now, do you think that that work ethic has not a place, because it would be hard to argue that a good work ethic doesn't have a place, but if you have this good work ethic and you're kind of in a learning mode, as everyone is early on, do you think that it's in some respects harder to break through the peers of not yours, but of a young person's trying to get their foot in the industry, now relative to what it was when you were doing it early on, just because of the massive amounts of social media and all that? You think it's harder now, or you think it's not necessarily any harder or easier than it's ever been?
I don't think the prize is there anymore. I don't think that the for the younger generation that are I joke about it, they're all the goats. They're all the greatest of all time with fire emojis after
Of
1 year.
course, they're all killing
Um,
it, right?
they're all just killing it, you know.
Yep.
Sarcasm here, but I just feel like the receiving end isn't driving the next generation as strong as the receiving end that I had. And that means, the editors I worked who pushed me, who always strived for better, the competition I had with my peers. I've freelanced pretty much my whole life. That's a long time of freelancing. So that's survival of the fittest, basically. You have to have, it's a dog eat dog business. Less so today than it was in my prime. But I mean, it was definitely where everybody was like, oh, you're working for that guy? I didn't know you could work for that guy or whatever. And people would find their way into constantly meddling in what I would consider my personal business. Today, I see in football, I mean, you could just be out there with your phone and you got the same vest that I got on and you're taking the same seat at the sidelines that I would be kneeling on. And I just don't think, I think the burnout factor for the end result of, to do it as a full-time gig forever, might not be there. And there's a cycle of the next, group of kids coming out of college. It's just the industry is so different now than it was, when I broke in. I mean, I think I broke in at probably one of I'm going to definitely say the most difficult time of photography when it came to what I have eclipsed in my career. And that's from, manually focusing slide film, and freaking nailing the exposures, which is not easy to do, right? And shooting people like Barry Sanders, who's just all over the place, and manually focusing that to, jumping all the way ahead to this technology that basically 90% of it is done by the camera. And now we have to frame it. Yes, we have to have our skills of each sport and we have to be creative, but I mean, I think that transition from all of that now, I think my concepts of color and light from working in a photo lab have made it easier for me to work with Photoshop and for all the things that I do technology wise today. But I do think that the transition that, this, I feel like, well, I used to ride a horse and now I drive a car. It's not like that. But I mean, do you know what I'm saying? I mean, I do think it was
Yeah.
quite the learning curve that a guy in my field, like who's done it for 40 plus years, has had to endure to be successful and to stay the line, to stay on it. Where today, I mean, you get the right equipment, you get the new Sonys or whatever. And, it's pretty much, and now there's things, that are beyond my brain for technology, like I'm not, I got to go find a kid to help me do something, the new, what is it? The R1 that Canon just came out with has like, I don't know, 150 custom functions. It's like, just make it work.
Yeah.
I don't, you know what I mean? It's just too much. So I'm not that on that far side of the technological verse, but I just do think that, from the beginning to now, versus, like guys that shot in the 40s and the 50s, it was all the same concepts, it was film, it was a camera, was processing end result, where we've endured that huge technological shift in, from to the digital realm, which blows my mind. What a Canon was a 1D, it was a 4 megapixels that we shot in the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
And we were happy with that. We were happy and excited about that. And now we're like, 25, 50, megapixels is like, you're happy until you have to run out of storage. It's like, he's got so much space.
Well, I'm just, amazed when I look at some of the earlier work by people like Walter Yost and Neil
Yeah.
and some of these, and, say in the late 50s or even earlier. And, they had, shooting film, obviously, in very low light situations.
Mm-hmm.
And, they had either 24 or 36 exposures in the camera. And what the images that they were able to create, whether it's some of the classic, the Muhammad Ali boxing photos, or the easy reference point is the Giants Colts championship game when Neil snuck onto the field as a kid. And you just realize, and there's that phrase, it's not the gear, it's the person behind the gear. The gear
Yeah.
simplifies some things. But I switched about, I don't know, 7-8 years ago from a lifetime of Canon over to Sony. And for me, what that's done is I'm not really as worried about the focus. I'm more thinking about the anticipation.
Hmm.
And and I know this, but if so and so has the ball on the 7 yard line, I'm thinking about the plays that I've seen them run in similar situations over the games. And I know that the team they're playing is the 25th ranked run defense. So already I'm thinking they're probably going to run, and they're probably going to run behind Ronnie Stanley because he's their best tackle. So I'm trying to position myself there, and I'm in the back of the end zone. So I'm at F8. I want everything sharp, and on and on. So I'm thinking strategically, and I'm not as worried about autofocus, because at this point the camera kind of, it's got that, it's going to handle
100%.
that. So it's kind of changed that. And I guess, if you line up the photographers with some version of the latest gear, or certainly very recent gear, I think it's that sport knowledge, that team knowledge, that play specific tendency knowledge that becomes the differentiator in present day. I mean, do you think that I'm sort of onto something, or would you add or take away from that, as far as where you think we are today to differentiate ourselves?
No, I definitely think you're exactly right. I think that the knowledge, I mean, that's, I do that in baseball. I mean, I know swings. I know so and so looks better as a lefty coming out of the box, than he does, from the hitting side. I know the way guys throw. I know, some pitchers. I mean, I'll use Paul Skeens as an example, just of recent. He actually looks better from the first base side, even though he's throwing from, what you would say is the third base side, because his head comes around and he just has an awkward. Hideo Nomo would he'd pop his head to first base every time he released the ball. He'd turn and look at first base side. So that's where, if you were on the normal side to shoot a right-handed hit pitcher, you'd get his ear. You'd never see his eyes. So I agree with you. I mean, knowledge, positioning. I mean, that's why, I mean, I tweaked my knee 3 weeks ago, but normally that's why you see me running still to this day. And I'm always trying to get myself in the best position. Now, I will say, on the NFL sidelines today, it ain't so easy, because we've got so much clutter, and you've got the doctors that lean out. You've got the sideline crew. You've got the people that just don't care and never care about you, the ball boys. So I find myself today making images through, like, under a guy's arm, for crying out loud, or windows of, and what people don't realize is how fast football is and how fast
Mm-hmm.
things happen. And your head's got to be on a swivel. And, you could be lazy and just go in the end zone and wait for it all to come to you, but that's just not the way I've ever worked football. I love to be on the sides and, whatever. I mean, I do go to the end zone for sure when they're, like in your situation you were just explaining, that's a perfect spot for that. But even you do all that, it's so fast, and then a little check off, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, where's the ball? Where did it go? And you're either happy or sad at that moment because you made it or you didn't make it.
Well, I'm
But
you know
yeah,
I'm always thinking about angles,
yeah,
angles of images. I mean, as you said, you can be straight on to a play, and it can work out. Sometimes the running back comes through a hole that's been opened by the blockers, and the running back's coming
right,
right at you, and and,
right.
and that's great. Nothing wrong with that at all. But when you recognize that this team likes to run a jet sweep, and so you want to be on the side to get the maybe get the blockers getting out in front of the running back, and you almost have a fan of, you've got the running back to the far left of the composition, and you've got two linemen in the middle and then to the right, and it's obvious that these guys are blocking, and
Way that he pops
like,
out.
yeah, those are the angles. And the frustrating thing, of course, is when in your mind's eye you think they're probably going to run this. They're probably going to run this. And they don't, because you're not going to be right every time, because you're
All
not
right.
the one calling the play.
Right.
So I've, when people ask me, especially young photographers, I say, you really have to place your bet where you think the best odds are in a situation, and know that you're not going to be right every time. And you have to be okay with it, as long as your logic was sound behind
Mhm.
why you chose
Mhm.
that angle.
And quick to react to, in case, like if there's enough room between you, the lens, and the field of play, where you can maybe, all of a sudden switch to that wide receiver and at least get him running with the ball versus missing the play entirely. Yeah. I mean, it's football's fast, no doubt about it. And baseball, everybody's like, how do you keep shooting baseball? It's so boring. It's so slow. And I'm like, no, there's so much to baseball, because I love the game. And that's where you have to let your mind be, creative. And, so you spend an inning on a Nolan Arenado, but then all of a sudden he dives and he makes a great play. And then you're like, that's all I needed. You got the quintessential infielder making that special play or whatever. I want to bring this up just because it's a pivotal moment in my career that was so special. And on film, in my Ken Griffey Jr. Sequence, because this was just such a thing. So it's Detroit. It's 1998. I don't know anymore. Now my brain is, he's deemed it his greatest catch ever, which is pretty special. You went to Detroit because it was like old Memorial Stadium. You could shoot on the field, on the gravel. There was no photo wells. So you could roam the circumference behind the home plate within reason, right? Not right behind home plate, but you could be off to the sides. You took your life into your own hands. So,
Definitely.
oh my gosh. But the backgrounds were black and it was gorgeous. And it was where, if any smart photographer back in that era, they were there at some point making pictures of somebody who was special, because you wanted them in that Detroit background light. For me, it was great because my wife's family is from Detroit, and so I would go up there and stay a week, and and pick games, and so in this particular game, I have so many batting pictures of Ken Griffey Jr. and blah 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 blah. And I said, God, the guy is known for this phenomenal defense. So I had my 600 f4 Nikon, and I remember Rob Tringali was there. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do something really different. And I'm going to actually, because I'm going to go into where the tarp is. So way down the line on third base. And I sat to the far left of the tarp. So in case a ball came, I wouldn't get hit. I was behind the tarp, like squatting down there. But now I've got a pretty much really nice direct line of center field, right? And, I've got my fanny pack full of film, and, and the light's beautiful. And I'm like shooting Griffey, I'm just like hands on his knees, whatever he's doing, I'm just like, this is great. This is clean. It's beautiful. Then I said to myself, stop. What if there's a play? Like, I got to roll the film.
You need film in your camera.
Wouldn't it suck if you motor this sequence and you run out of film right at the peak moment? So I stopped. I think I probably had shot 10 frames on this roll of film. And now, very hard for me not to do anything but just watch Griffey, right? And so I think I got him a couple times breaking on a ball. And then Luis Gonzalez gets up and he hits one to pretty much right center. And now I got Griffey. Now it's not focusing towards me, going away. So I'm focusing away and he's running, and I've got that. And I mean, it was like a millisecond. He flies up in the air. His body goes over the fence over his waistline. He jumps this fence. It was amazing. And now, do I have the ball? Because that's
got to have the ball.
You might not have the ball. I mean, we're talking whatever that was back then. Not even 10 frames a second. I don't even know. I don't even think so. 8 frames a second maybe. So he makes this catch, comes back, he throws the ball in, he high fives Jay Buhner with his glove, and then he goes 2 out. It was the coolest thing, and I'm like, all the light was like different, like he went from pure sun into like speckled light and then he's at the fence and it's black background, and I don't know if he's in the shade. So now I got this roll of film and I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I think I got something. I might have shit. I might have nothing. I might have missed focus on the whole thing. But I couldn't take a chance of not doing this. So I asked Rob, I said, hey man, I know you're going back to New York. If I arrange this for SI to pick this up, maybe I got a leading off, maybe. So I put on there, I think I did +1. So it was a roll of 200. and I did +1 just because I felt like the best part of the images were in the darker area. And I wanted to make sure that I got that as opposed to just him running. Right. So Rob's like, absolutely, I'll take it for you. And he takes it back. And he told me he handed it to the courier, and that's all I knew. And so now so that was on a Sunday, not Sunday. So Monday comes, I don't hear anything. And I'm just like, and I wasn't going to call. I wasn't going to be a pest. Jimmy Colton was the editor of the leading off. So I got a call on Tuesday morning from Jimmy, and he's like, Tom? And I'm like, yes. He's like, well, and I'm like, what happened? Like, how did it look? And he goes, well, we're going to do something that we've never done before. And I go, what? He goes, you got all 6 pages of the leading off. You got the whole, it was shut up, right? No way did this happen. And so I had, and I'll never forget, within a second you have here I was waiting days and relying on a friend to take the film, and the processing had to be just right. And you just talk about laying your heart out on a table and hoping, it's like.
And the funny thing is, now Junior's a photographer.
And now I know. I saw him last year when I was there in Baltimore. He was there working with the new, whatever the new Sony was. I was like, who let you in, man? Well, you can't be shooting. This is ridiculous.
I
wanted to give him some crap like he's gave all the photographers all the time,
Exactly. Yeah. Him and Randy Johnson, now they're running around enjoying photography.
I joke with Randy all the time. I'm like, you're a Hail Mary just being there.
Yeah.
We're all Hail Mary in it, and Randy's at waist level. He's like, oh yeah, no problem.
So when I turned 40, I started playing in a men's over 40 baseball league. And I played in college, and anyway, so I've been playing for a number of years in this wood bat men's over 40 league. And I bring that up because, there's a number of times when, I'm shooting a baseball game and you get a sense that someone's kind of nearby you, and you turn around and there's one of the players, could be one of the coaches, and they're trying to kind of look through your lens, especially if it's a long lens, and see, either what kind of gear you're using, because, they're hobbyists and they're enjoying it. And I've gotten into so many conversations where I'm sharing information about photography, and then they're sharing hitting tips for me.
Awesome.
For my league. I sat with Jason Veritek in the dugout during a rain delay, and we were talking hitting for like 20 minutes in the rain delay. But over the years, have you had a similar experience where players have asked you about photography? I know Rod Carew used to be an avid photographer, but have you had that? Have you had that with some of the guys where they're curious about photography, or not that much?
I've had a few. I remember Xander Bogaerts came over and hung out with me in a photo well during spring training a few years back. It was all over the Nesson because we were sitting together, and I was letting him use my camera and everything. There's always a curious group. Randy, you brought up Randy. Back when Randy was with the Expos a long, long time ago, and then obviously with the Mariners, we always talked photography. And I told him one time, I was like, he just didn't know, he would tell me he didn't, he wouldn't have time to do it or pursue it, or, and I just said, you have the opportunity to travel to all these fun cities. I said, just get up a little earlier and do some street photography and go around and do cityscapes, or just the highlights of a city, and just do architectural stuff. And I said I was just trying to encourage him to do something different, but use his camera and, get out there. And it's so funny for me to see him today, just, doing his safaris, and and then he's gotten opportunities to shoot, one of his passions, and rock and roll, and get to go do, that kind of stuff. So it's fun. But I did have one guy give me a lesson, and back, had nothing to do with photography, but Greg Maddox and I were buddies. And at the time I was the deemed batting practice pitcher for my son's high school team. And which, my arm was just like a rubber band. I asked Greg, I said, I want to know how you're able to get the incredible accuracy of how you can paint on the black. And he showed me some grips And I will tell you that I did his grip, which was more of a one finger index, like that.
Right. So yeah, putting it on that one seam. Yep.
Yep. And then snap it out like that. And I would throw strikes to these kids all day long. And then I would mess with them a little bit because he would tell me, if you put pressure on your index, on the index finger right here, and just release it a little bit different. If you remember with Maddox, he would get this, the ball would do a little wobble as it came in and stuff. I was able to perfect that because of Maddox. And that's when they were like my son, especially, would like, stop throwing that.
Well, yeah. Well, you couldn't have a much better teacher. That's
My
for
God,
sure.
it was so great.
So, when for people who were listening, there's a feeling amongst a good number of people where they might say, baseball, it's such a slow sport. And, and whether we're talking about, you shooting baseball, or we're talking about a hobbyist photographer who's photographing a family member, could be a child, a grandchild, etc. When you're in a sport, when you're photographing someone in a sport that is slower paced or has breaks in the action, unlike basketball, let's say,
Right.
what would be your advice of what do you look for in those down moments when the pitch isn't coming in and the batter's not running around the bases? What do you kind of make yourself aware of to try to capture, so you're not hanging on every pitch as the only times to make pictures?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm restricted and I'm in the photo well, I always look at what else I can do around in the photo well. So whether that's, do I have dugout access? Can I see into the dugout to make, something featurey? Can I see the on deck batter, where he's, doing his thing over there, just little nuances of pregame, where you're, well, not what you're saying during the game.
Could be pregame. Just I'm thinking of, yes, things that you've done, but I'm also thinking of your advice to just amateur photographers who
Yeah.
might be able to roam around the entire field because
Yeah.
it's a little league game, a high school game, but just some inspiration, some photo inspiration suggestions.
Yeah, I mean, I would think, like, I'll just use Little League as an example. I mean, kids are kids. So when you're, you got so many fun personalities, and you might see, you might see kids in the dugout cutting it up, but then you might see a kid out in the outfield doing spins and butterflies or whatever. You just, like, I think that really with any sport, I mean, I go to my grandson's soccer games and I pull my hair out because I'm not taking pictures, and I'm just like going, what is he doing right now? Like what? Like, it's just,
Yes.
you just see it, it's that age, 10, 11 years old, they're not laser focused on on exactly what they're doing. They might be good when they, things are happening, but then they just kind of drift off. So I mean, I just think with all sports, I mean, there's color, there's pageantry to every sport that, beside the actual game action, like obviously we know with football, there's so much going on the sidelines. There's so much going on, even towards the fans or, away from the bench. It's same with baseball. I just feel like you just have to, you have to have your radar out when you're shooting, and you have to look around and see. I mean, I might make a portrait of a guy that I didn't expect to make just because I happen to look to the right and he's coming on the bench and he just happens to be, it's hard, right? Because it's so many moving parts to a baseball, football, basketball. Everything is just constantly moving around. So you get moments to capture something, and sometimes, you get a guy sitting there dripping sweat, and all of a sudden, you got 2 seconds and you make a great image that lasts forever. That wasn't part of your plan, but you make images like that. And you can do that in all sports, Little League, especially. Little League is so fun.
Mhm.
You get these late afternoon games and the color and the light. And, I just, Jeannie Fruth, she does a lot of fun, amateur stuff. And every time you're looking at her work, you're like, it's light, it's composure, it's I'm sure there's a million things that she shot that she's not showing you, but the ones that are so special are because of, what I'm talking about, the kid's face, or the dirt, flying, or the, that late afternoon light that's just makes anything look great. You know what I mean? Like, it's just,
Oh yeah. Yeah, Jean was a guest on the podcast, and she she's just, besides being a great photographer, she's just a really sweet person, just a really,
Yeah.
really wonderful person. And she gets right in there, with amateur sports, especially obviously if you're authorized to shoot the event, which certainly she is, she has access where she goes until someone says, hey, you can't be there. And that could be, almost like at the foot of the pitcher warming up in the bullpen,
Mhm.
not in a disruptive way, but just
Right.
getting as close as you realistically and reasonably can be to get some really unique angles. And when I talked with Jean, I mentioned to her Ozzie Sweet, the photographer. And he used to put players like up in the air almost, and then shoot with the sky as the background. And his stuff is amazing, which is it's sort of an unintended segue to a question, which is, whether it's past or present, who are those photographers that you really, either look up to, or you just, you kind of marvel at what they're able to achieve? Who would those people be?
Well, early on, definitely Walter. And what I loved about Walter was, going back to the commercial side versus the editorial side. He showed that path. I watched him, do the things that he did for Sports Illustrated, but yet then I also saw, what he was doing for commercial clients as well. And I said, that's something I want to be able to do. Well, you mentioned Ozzie Sweet, and very dear to my heart. I would say, for a long time, everybody called me Mr. Blue Sky because I would do so many portraits with the blue sky because it works and it's fantastic and it's pretty. And Ozzy was the king of that. Obviously, you just mentioned that. And I had the privilege. I was shooting for a TV Guide. I was doing the Red Sox after they won the World Series. So this is spring of '96. No, I'm sorry,
This would
2004.
be 04.
They won in 2004, so it was spring of 2005. And so I was shooting Schilling, or maybe it was before they won, because I think Schilling was new to the team, so that would have been 2004 spring. Anyway, Ozzy was there, and he was doing. They were allowing him to do some portraits for his book, and so we were both on the same backfield, and I got to meet him, and I mean, he was late 80s, maybe 90 then.
Wow.
And he was just, just a soft spoken, beautiful little mustache, just, everything you've ever saw of Ozzy. And he actually knew who I was, which really blew my mind. It blew my mind.
Wow.
And he's like, yeah, I really admire your work. Because the guy that he was with, Larry Canali, I had worked with at Tough Stuff magazine, and he became Ozzy's handler. And the later books that were produced of Ozzy's life and his works were done by Larry Canali. And so I don't know if Larry fed him me or whatever. He showed him me. But yeah, that was a highlight of my life, because here's a guy that I've, in my industry that I emulated and I looked up to so much. And yeah, I thought Ozzy was definitely very, very special in my portrait work. I mean, his
Yeah.
work was so magical. And again, I say Walter and Ozzy for sure. Those are the two
Yeah,
guys that I
and
look up
definitely very very worthy of your adoration for sure. What would you say, over your career have been the toughest situations, whether it's, and you don't have to name names, but the types or situations with certain people, names can be withheld, or
to.
locations where you had to get the shot, but it seemed like everything was working against you.
I mean, I will say over the years, the big events like the Super Bowl are more and more difficult because you feel as a photographer on the sideline that you're not significant anymore. There's just so much happening, and and you're there to get the game, and you're there to get the finality of it. And then all of a sudden, like at the end of a Super Bowl, they rope you off and say, nope, you can't go. And you got, what you're born to do, is get out there, get into the scrum, and make those incredible celebratory images that are, life, for everlasting. You can't do it because a bunch of goons in red jackets say, no, we're going to let, 5 people get out there and do it, and that's it. And it's just, I find that to be very, very discouraging and very, on so many levels. I mean, you shoot a game, all your juices are flowing, your adrenaline's going, and then all of a sudden you just like gotta put it all away and watch it. And that's just, that's just not me. It's not my nature. I can't do it. I still to this day can't sit in the stands and watch a game and not have a camera. I maybe one day I'll be able to. And I do regret that with my son, and I regret it now with my grandson, because I'm still working and I just can't enjoy watching something that I could have photographed and made. And that's kind of weird and sad, but I don't know. Maybe today I hang it all up, I don't know.
If it is weird and sad, I'm oddly glad to hear you say that, because then I'm not the only person.
Yeah, good.
I mean, yeah, if I'm at a game, for that matter, if I'm traveling and I'm for some reason I'm in New York City or I'm wherever, I want to have the camera with me, because you know what, for me, I feel like there was a point in time years ago where I started to see the world photographically. Mm-hmm. And even without literally having a camera in my hand, I would see compositions everywhere I go. And it could be street portraits, it could be landscapes, it could be architecture, things that I don't really do a whole lot of. But in my mind's eye, I'm framing it. I'm sort of recognizing where the light's coming from. You're nodding your head, so I guess I'm also not the only one, huh?
No, I mean, I will conceive photos for my wife all the time with her phone, and I'll walk away and I'll just say, no, look at this, look at the light here, go do this, and I mean, I've gotten into wildlife mostly down here, so it's a lot of beautiful birds and gators or whatever, and I see photos wherever I go. It's our brain. It's the way we work, and I never want to lose that, like we go on trips. I've gotten lazy on my trips with my phone now, but I still, it's still a vehicle in my hand. It's still a camera, I don't feel like schlepping the heavier stuff, when I'm in Europe or whatever, but if I'm doing something specific, like, last week we were in a wildlife preserve and I had to go shoot the Bucks game. So I was like, well, I'm going to take my 400 out and we're going to walk the boardwalk. And, so I'm walking with my whole family with my 400, just hoping I, get a glimpse of something that's worthy. And, and I did. And that's, don't have regrets, that's the thing with when you make the decision to take the gear, as opposed to not taking it, seeing something and then not having it, not making the image. My wife will be like, just leave the camera. Let's just go for a walk at the boardwalk. I'm like, but what if there's the purple, yellow belly, whatever, and I don't get a picture of that? Are you kidding me? I can't. No, I always have to do it. So,
you know what, if you have a spoonbill coming in for a landing and you didn't have that 400, you are going to kick yourself, not just for a day and not just for a week, but forever. You'll talk about the spoonbill that got away.
Did you ever see the one I have? Did you see that?
No, do you actually have a spoonbill picture?
Dude, I'm gonna take this in my living room right now. This is the story. The first time she said to me, my wife, you need to come to this boardwalk, nature center. It's amazing. I was like, yeah. She goes there with her girlfriend and they do laps and they walk it all the time. So the day I decide to go, it rains, but it rains when we get there. So now I'm under a pavilion and it's pouring and I'm like, this is awful. This is not what I wanted. I got my 400 in my hands, whatever. It stops raining and now the sun is starting to set. So you have those rain clouds and the sun is reflecting off those rain clouds, which are now sending, like, the water is gold, like the reflection on the water versus the clouds. And guess what? A pink spoonbill comes in and my sports photography eye sees it really quick. I motor and I get it landing. It's amazing. And I'm not saying that because I took it. It looks like, I'm going to show it to you because I've got it on our wall.
So now realize I had absolutely no idea that you had a spoonbill picture. That well, yeah, and so obviously people can't see Tom right now, but
right.
Walking me,
you to see it real quick.
He's walking me through his home to show essentially one of the most gorgeous pictures of a spoonbill I've ever seen.
Is that cool?
That is.
I mean, that's just like when you said that, I thought maybe you saw it.
No, but that's crazy that you actually have that picture. So I head to Costa Rica next week, and and I'll be, all over photographing birds and all, and I think
You gotta
actually
get it. You can't.
that's probably a good point is, for me, most of what I shoot is sports and wildlife around the world. And I have found though that whatever I'm photographing, I feel like any type of photography almost kind of informs every other type of photography you do,
Uh-huh.
whether it's composition or it's understanding light. And, I have some friends and they say, oh, I don't really do that kind of photography. And I say, stop with the cop out. If you do photography, you do that kind of photography because there's
Right.
something to be learned from that.
Right.
You have you seen that across your career where you kind of pick up tidbits shooting different things that help later on and things that you didn't even think about?
Yeah, I mean, I said definitely in portraits, and whenever I'm shooting family members or athletes, I think, different lighting styles, different lighting techniques, sometimes making things easier than they might not have, like when you're thinking of a certain portrait, like a lifestyle portrait, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I got to do this, I got to do this. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, wow, natural light is pretty sweet with an 85,
Right.
1.4. It's things like that. But I've always said my whole life, if I had to just take pictures of a rock, I'd still enjoy it because I just love photography. I love creating. I love the fact that you can, make something from nothing with a camera. You can create beauty. Beauty creates itself for you, and sometimes you can create it. Different lighting techniques. Yeah, I mean, it's an art form. It's always an art form. It always has been an art form. And I definitely consider myself an artist. All photographers should consider themselves artists. We've been, the respect level of sports photography is, I feel like not what it should be. I feel like it's definitely gone to a place where, everybody's just, the world is good enough, and nobody cares what you did yesterday, and it's what you did now. And I think that's sad because I do think the industry is, there's value in every creator, and everybody that does something should be honored for it. I'm not saying have trophies and stuff like that, but I'm just saying, admire a good work, no matter what it is, no matter what.
Yeah, no doubt. Because if it was that easy, anybody could do it, and everybody's not doing it, and everybody's not necessarily doing it well. So I think if you're doing it and you're putting in the effort and you're building the skill and you're creating the images, pictures are, as they say, worth 1,000 words, and pictures bring about emotion. And
Yeah.
I think if you're creating something that brings about a reaction, then you're doing something with meaning. And I think I agree with you that it really should be recognized. That's really, I think, what it is. It's just being recognized for the skills and talent that it takes to do that.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously luck involved all the time.
Sure.
You're there, you've got the gear, but you're not really aware. You don't know what's going to happen around the corner. And, sometimes you make an amazing image. And sometimes, one story comes to mind real quick, was when the ESPN hired me to do a story on the Yankees. And this is like 2004. And they said, you're the guy we want because you have such a good relationship with all those players and the PR people and what have you. So, but we don't want to focus on any specific player. We want it to be generic. And I'm like, wow, that's hard. I don't know. Like, here's this great team, right? You've got Sheffield, you've got A-Rod, you've got obviously Jeter and Posada, and just so many great players. And yet, how do you? So I thought, this is the old Yankee Stadium still. And I was friends with Rick Cerrone, the PR guy. And I said, how about if I can have access to the tunnel where the players go out? I felt like that was no one's ever photographed. You're not allowed usually to do that. And I got permission to do that. And I just thought I wanted to do like blurred, this is the first digital camera. So it's 4 megapixels.
Hmm.
And it wasn't good in low light, right? It definitely got pixelated. And so I was trying my best to not turn the ISO way, way up, because then it would just be so bad. It was worse than film grain. It was really bad. So I thought I would just follow the guys as they all went down the tunnel, right? Well, don't you know, everybody goes down one at a time. There's no group of players going. This is in my head. I thought it would be this cool image.
Hmm.
It's Yankees, it's the tunnel. And then there's the sign halfway through the tunnel I want to thank the good Lord above for making me a Yankee, Joe DiMaggio. So I realized this is, for me in the beginning, an epic failure because it's not going to happen. So then I was like, as guys were coming out, I kind of pushed it a little bit. I was afraid to do anything beyond the door. Like I just thought I would be at the door because that's what I told Rick I was going to do, and just shoot the guys as they went down the tunnel. And I started, I don't know, I'm like, I got nothing. And now the pressure's on me. I feel like what I'm going to have is like a bunch of nothing, for ESPN. And so Posada comes out and he's in his gear and he goes out and then he forgets something and he comes running back towards me in his gear. And so I got him from a further perspective coming towards me. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool, right? When he went under the sign. So Jeter was the last guy out, right? And I said, hey, Jeets, I'm going to follow you down. And he goes, do what you need to do, Tom. No big deal, right? So no setup or anything. And Jeter goes down the tunnel and he's got his bats in his hand. His glove is on the top of his bats. And he takes his right arm and he bangs the sign. And I'm at 60th of a second at 2.8.
Oh, wow. 60th
of a second at 2.8. So I got one frame. When he hit the sign, he held still enough.
Oh, wow.
And it razor sharp. And I got no frame before and no frame after because it's too blurry. But I made an image, and that image blew people's minds. I mean, it ran in the magazine. Steiner Sports went crazy trying to get it from me. I put up a good fight with that one. And it's, to me, one of my iconic images. And it was just, honestly, all by accident, trial and error. I just wouldn't. I don't know. I just wouldn't fail. I was like, I've got to make something here. And, even though they didn't want to focus on one player, it was a good player to focus on,
right
at the end there. So,
well, it's luck or it's fortunate, but you put yourself in the position for that luck to take place.
True.
So that's everything. Well, I know that people are going to want to, know where they can take a look at your work, whether it's Spoonbills or it's Jackson Holiday or it's whatever, the next great and all the great work you've done resides. Where's the best place for people to kind of keep track of what you're doing and connect in that way with you?
Well, if you Google my name, it'll just take you right to DiPacephotography.com. And there, my portfolio is on there. And then you have a selection of pages to look at, whether it's lifestyle portraits or action or history of the games, baseball and football and what have you, on location portraits. It's all there. And the Baseball Weekly covers.
Very good. Very good. Well, Tom, I appreciate you being on the show. It goes so much beyond saying how much I've enjoyed, talking with you. And I hope that, we'll run into each other at Camden Yards in the upcoming season. I want to let everybody know if they want to see what I have going on. You can, of course, check out things on Instagram at Mitch Stringer Images. You can go online to MitchStringerImages.com. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks with another episode of Artist Spotlight, the podcast. Until then, I wish you great light. I wish you great shooting, and we'll talk again soon.